I'm more specifically of like, all right, doctor, how do we make babies? And he's like,
The birds and the bees.
Are you kidding? It's like,
So let's say
no.
you had a grill out and you had hot dogs. Okay. What happened there, Elizabeth?
I was making spaghetti because in theory it sounded really good. And then I pulled out the hamburger meat, and just the smell of raw meat just made me so upset. It was the worst thing.
You started crying?
I cried. It smelled so bad.
Lily joy, which means pure joy. So we'll get to it in a bit, but having a baby who, if you met her outside of when she's squawking at you because she wants another bite of food, is literally the embodiment of joy. To have prayed for that and name her that, and now she literally is that. It's a crazy cool thing. Hey MVP family, welcome to the Micah and Ben podcast, where we promote having conversations about things we all face, but few of us are actually discussing. This podcast is where casual conversation leads ultimately to a strengthened us.
The point is that even when challenging obstacles come our way and we begin to feel alone, we've got to remember that we aren't. It's easy to see the highlight reel on social media and begin believing that's the full story, but it's not. That's just one side of it.
Let's have conversations that involve all sides of our lives in the hopes that we can encourage each other by doing so. Join us as we have a candid conversation with some humor thrown in and a guest on our show, of course. And don't forget to subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to or watching from.
Be sure to also like and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter using Actual MBP, or you can email us actualmbp@gmail.com.
But who emails anymore? It's basically like snail mail.
I email so much. So much.
Okay. Well, do you also work for the Pony Express?
Yes. I also send mail out via pigeon.
Pigeon? His name is Ted, okay? And he's a astute flyer.
I just got a thought in my head. Ted, he's a pigeon wearing a bow tie. He's got like a little tuxedo on.
Well,
With glasses.
Sounds like you know Ted. I don't understand the problem. Right now, the real estate market is hot. Something about, I don't know, being in quarantine, you look around and you're like, yeah, I don't have enough space to do all the activities and hobbies that I'm now doing because I have time. The trouble is knowing who to reach out to. So what if you knew not only one of the top 50 realtors in Austin, not Austin. It's like a mix between Austin and awesome. Anyway, what if you not only knew one of the top 50 realtors in Austin, but also one of my top 5 favorite people and probably Elizabeth's top 5 favorite people as well? Well, guess what? You can know him. His name is Barrett Raven, and he started as our realtor, but quickly turned into one of our best friends. And I get to see him on a weekly basis, and it is one of my favorite times of the week. So if you're looking to buy a home, if you're looking to sell a home, reach out to him. Just give him an email at barrettraven@realtyaustin.com. Yes, I just got done making jokes about email. Nonetheless, send him an email. Heck, just send him a carrier pigeon message as well. I'm sure he'll really get a kick out of that. How many times have you thought about a book and thought, yeah, I don't have time to read that right now, but I really want to read it just not right now, or told somebody that. And then you got into quarantine and you're like, I have all the time in the world, and turns out time is not the issue. I just didn't want to read. Well, guess what? You're in good company because I don't like to read either. I love to listen though. And if you're listening to this podcast, chances are you also like to listen to books. If that's your thing, you need to check out Audible. I bet you've heard of it because it's tied to Amazon, and you'd have to be living quite literally in the Amazon to not have heard of Amazon. It's ironic, I know. But nonetheless, thanks to our connection with Audible, you could actually get a free trial with Audible and listen to your ebooks anytime in the shower, working out, driving, cooking. Heyo, you could use that Amazon show or Alexa show or whatever, and you could listen to it in the kitchen while you're just cooking up a storm. The way you get that free trial is you go to, guess what? audibletrial.com/MBP. So just if you want to try the Audible trial, that's the first thing you type in, .com/ stands for Micah and Ben Podcast, MBP.
On our last episode, we talked about mind control and controlling our mindset. Ultimately, no one can claim responsibility over our minds except for ourselves. Micah discussed the stop technique, and I talked about how having control over my own thoughts would have kept me out of trouble on numerous occasions. I feel like that's just like my life, though. Like, ooh, should have done that. Ooh, shouldn't have said that.
It's an ongoing story. It's the never-ending story.
It is the never-ending story.
But without the dog dragon. I don't remember his name. Somebody's probably going to hunt me down for that.
Never seen that.
The what?
The never-ending story.
Elisabeth?
Ben, I'm not surprised if you haven't seen Neverending Story, and you better be recording because I want this on the record.
Apparently, I'm the offensive one here.
You see, normally it's me.
I'm saying I'm not surprised that he hasn't seen it because he just started watching The Office like a year ago.
Yeah, this is true.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm on like I've watched it like 3 times on my 4th playthrough, so like I'm catching up like faster.
Yeah, grow up and watch it 7 times like a real American.
I've never seen the Never-Ending Story.
Yeah,
never seen it.
I'm still watching it because of what it is. I'm just kidding.
On today's episode, we're going to be talking about kind of a tough topic. It's one that can make people feel uncomfortable, but we're doing this because we also know that there are people who need to know that they're not alone, that they're seen and heard, that they're loved, and that they're going to be okay. So we're talking about miscarriages and how they can affect people in ways that not much else can. We're joined today by Micah's wife, Elisabeth, who will be sharing her experience alongside Micah. They had 2 miscarriages. The first happened in August of 2017, and the second was in October of 2018. Prior to these, they had a successful pregnancy with their daughter, Charlotte. Since their miscarriages, they have had their daughter, Lily. I'll be kind of an interviewer for this episode and let Mike and Elisabeth share their story. Let's dive in, guys. So
let's do it.
Tell us a little background. Micah, you had shared how you and Elisabeth had met, how quickly y'all went from dating to engaged to married. What was the conversation like deciding you wanted to have kids?
I blame Elisabeth for this one because she sent me a yoga video of a mom and her daughter doing yoga together. And I remember where I was sitting. I was sitting in the parking lot. I was teaching in Leander ISD, and it was like during our middle of the year, January, Feb conference, something like that. And it was a lunch break. I was sitting in my car watching this video. I started tearing up. I was like, this is the stupidest thing. Why am I tearing up over a yoga video? And so I texted Elisabeth. I was like, so you want to start having kids? Like, you want to try? She was like, you're serious? I said, yes. And that was it. So it was her fault. Just want to have that on the record. But ultimately, we were very comfortable around kids. Her side of the family already had kids in the family. We're both the babies of our family. So our siblings had, and I had been a camp counselor. I'd been around kids all growing up. And so it was a real easy conversation.
Yeah, and it really wasn't long or drawn out at all. We just kind of decided we would try, and we did make a pre-conception appointment with my OBGYN just to kind of talk through not how to make kids, but basically anything that could go wrong while you're trying and just things to look out for. And then we went home and started trying to make babies.
I wonder if that's a conversation that's ever had to have been had at an OBGYN. Like, a couple comes in and they're like, so
you just help us out real quick.
We're wanting to get pregnant. And the doctor's like, okay. They're like, so.
I mean, honestly though, so kid you not, that actually does happen because it's not like you can just get pregnant at any point during the month. There's a very specific 72-hour window when the female is ovulating, and that's when you get pregnant. And not
Fun word.
everybody knows that.
Super exhilarating.
And not everybody knows that. So, yeah, those conversations do have to be had. It's not just go home and, have as
Right.
much sex as you want. Like, there's a science behind it.
I'm not gonna say.
I'm more specifically of like, all right, doctor, how do we make babies? And he's like,
The birds and the bees.
Are you kidding? It's like,
So let's
no,
say
no.
you're at a grill out and you had hot dogs. Okay, just kidding.
So did y'all always want just 2, or how did you decide how many kids you wanted? So y'all are at 2 now. Are y'all done?
We're really content with our 2 girls. Originally back at the beginning of our relationship, we always said 2 was a green light, 4 was a yellow, and 6 was a red. And
Oof.
I know. And then I got pregnant and I was like, I'm not doing this that many times. But we've had 4 pregnancies. And I always go back to that it's not just 2 kids that we've had 4 pregnancies, and that alone takes a toll on my body, but it also takes a toll on the relationship because making a baby is not just sex. There's a science to it and there's timing to it, and that's really trying on a relationship, especially once you already have children.
Mm.
So I think we're good.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add. I think looking back on it, that whole like green light, yellow light, red light thing was very real, and now looking back, very stupid. But
6. What were we thinking?
yeah,
dogs. Well, 6 dogs.
I mean the whole point was that's a red light. Like we're definitely not having 6, but we like the idea of man-to-man defense. We don't want to have to switch and play up zone. So yeah, we're very content with our 2 and would much rather have just a plethora of dogs.
Mm-hmm.
So how was pregnancy and birth? Like, how was the experience of pregnancy for you and the birth of Charlotte in general terms? Like, we don't want to be inside the hospital room, but yeah, no. How was your first pregnancy and birth in general terms?
So, first pregnancy was remarkably easy. I had no morning sickness. I had the general exhaustion that comes with pregnancy, but overall, it was really totally fine.
Except
I hated meat.
There was a time.
I hated meat.
Quick side note. I get home from coaching. I got home. We were both teaching at the time. I got home after, and I walk in, and she is cracking up. But she turns around, and her eyes are red from crying, and she's like got tears running down her face. And I just froze. What? I don't know if I'm supposed to be laughing with you or crying with you. Like, what's happening? Like, please fill me in. I just jumped in mid-series here and need to catch up on the first 5 seasons. So, what happened there, Elisabeth?
I was making spaghetti because in theory it sounded really good, and then I pulled out the hamburger meat, and just the smell of raw meat just made me so upset. It was the worst thing.
You started crying?
I cried. It smelled so bad. And I've talked to multiple women about this since that have had kids, and they're like, yes, I hated meat when I was pregnant. And like with all 4 pregnancies, the sight of chicken.
Oh yeah.
Made me sick.
Yeah. I remember that one.
So anyway,
I feel like every pregnant woman craves pickles.
No. I'm sorry. No. Hard pass. I craved Taco Bell Crunchwrap Supreme with Dr. Pepper.
Specifically.
With all the kids. And I don't eat Taco Bell outside of being pregnant.
It's true. I do. She doesn't.
Yeah.
But I've also never been pregnant, so I can't.
You also, I'll add to this because it probably will be one that you won't mention. Elisabeth also, you wouldn't know that she was pregnant until it was like, you're like, oh, are you like 1 month pregnant? She's like, no, I'm 9 months. I'm like
due next
I'm
week.
like 3 weeks away for you. It's like,
no. Well, Ben, we were at your house. We had friends in Houston.
Yeah, Castros.
Yeah, and we were at your house, and I was 6 months pregnant in a bikini, and nobody knew I was pregnant. Do you remember that?
I I do. I
Oh.
do. No, because you guys came. That's when we stole the furniture. That's when. That's when somebody
That
put
wasn't supposed to be on the podcast, man. We talked about this.
somebody put furniture on the was that time somebody put furniture on the curb, and like we went to go take it, and then we were like, maybe we should ask, like it's just on the curb, and so like we went and asked them, and they were like, yeah. Was it that time?
Yes, it was that time.
Oh,
yes.
yeah.
So anyway, my
forgot you were-
pregnancies were
yeah.
very easy. Outside of the car wreck when we were pregnant with Charlotte,
Yeah.
and I struggled mentally when I was pregnant with her. But as soon as I gave birth, it was really totally fine. But the
Yeah.
pregnancy overall, like my main symptom was I was exhausted. I took naps all the time.
I must be pregnant.
I'm pregnant all the time then. Maybe that's what's wrong. I'm forever creating a baby.
I remember when she told me she was pregnant, because it was a Sunday. We were both small group leaders at our church for the youth group, and I had just gotten home. And I remember she kept texting me like, "Are you coming inside? Like, are you coming upstairs? When are you going to be home?" I'm just like,
We had taken
woman,
separate cars for
chill.
whatever
Like,
reason.
you never asked me this many times, and it didn't even dawn on me. I had no frame of reference for like, oh, I wonder if, because usually I pick up on stuff. This time, totally oblivious. And I walked in the door, and I could see straight to the kitchen table, and on it was a little onesie that said, "My dad is a superhero." And I, like, my whole body went numb, like as if I had just taken a muscle relaxer, and then simultaneously my heart almost burst through my chest, and I just started bawling my eyes out and shaking because I was so excited. I've wanted to be a dad. I said this on my story like episode. I've wanted to be a dad since I was 15. So to finally be a dad.
Mhm.
That was like it was like it's all coming true.
Oh yeah, my dreams are true. I'm hugging my wife who's pregnant with my
Carrying
baby.
Your baby. Yeah.
So yeah, the car wreck was probably the biggest twist to all of that, because we both then were dealing with depression from that experience. That was probably the only twist, and I was dealing with that more than she was,
Right.
especially after birth.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it.
Yeah. Well, so in comparing it to Charlotte's pregnancy, how was your experience during your second pregnancy?
My symptoms were not nearly as predominant
Uh-huh.
when I first took a test and it was positive. One of like the first symptoms for me is that my breasts get really sore, and then I get like somewhat nauseous, and if I become like adverse to meat, that's the other big indicator. And I was like, I feel weird, but like we just started trying. Like, I'll take a test just because it's been about 4 weeks. So, and it was positive, but it was very short lived. Like
Yeah.
those symptoms. Like one day I'd have them, the next day I wouldn't, which was
Right.
very weird.
Right. Now, about when did you have the initial thought of like this might be a miscarriage? Like when did that thought show up, and how did it feel? Walk us through that.
About a week after we got the positive pregnancy test, I started noticing that I was not just going every other day with symptoms, it was like every few days.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, I started having spotting. And spotting is not like a normal period. It's just like whenever you wipe, there's a little bit of blood.
Mm-hmm.
And spotting in pregnancy is typically a slightly different color than normal. And I started noticing that it was not looking like a normal pregnancy spotting. And that was one of my big indicators. So I
Mhm.
called my doctor and let her know. And it was really late at night. So they were like, well, there's not much we can do. So give us a call in the morning if you're still spotting. And I did. And they brought me in. So,
And I remember her telling me these things, and
yeah.
I just, to give myself some slack, I didn't take them seriously to the direction of like it might be a miscarriage, because we just had a perfectly fine normal pregnancy. So when she's telling me all this stuff, my response was like, "Oh, babe, you're like, it's fine. Like, it's probably just different. You know, every kid's different. That's what we hear, and so every experience is going to be different." So I I wasn't necessarily dismissive, at least I didn't intend to come across that way, but I was more like, "You're fine, like, it's all gonna be good.
Yeah.
It's normal and part of the pregnancy."
So the inevitable question: how did it feel losing that first baby?
It was really confusing and honestly really embarrassing just because we had just had such a healthy kid. I mean, Charlotte was a big, healthy kid.
Mm-hmm.
And then feeling like my body was somehow not able to carry life was just really weird. And it makes you question your womanhood and like, wow, like my body's not doing literally what it was designed to do. Like, what's wrong with me? So it's just a really weird time for me.
Yeah, I remember being dumbfounded. We did the blood test to, like, that's the most surefire way you're gonna find out if you're pregnant or not, compared to, like, a pee stick or something like that, and I was actually standing at my sink in our bathroom when she got off the phone, and she just shook her head and burst into tears and put her head on my chest. And I had that initial thought that a lot of people have when they go through a really traumatic experience, whether usually medical, but like I'm sure people felt it on 9/11 if they lost somebody there. Even right now with like coronavirus, anybody else could get coronavirus, but I'm not supposed to catch it, or I'm not supposed to know somebody that died from it, even though we know two people that have. And so it's it was the same thing. Like, no, other people are supposed to have miscarriages. I'm not supposed to have a miscarriage. Like that's not supposed to be a real thing in my life.
Right. It's something that happens, but it's not supposed to happen to me.
Right, like happens
Yeah.
to them, not us, that
Right.
kind of thing. And it's not like I'm wishing other people to have a miscarriage at all. It's not that at all. But it's like
That's not our family
I
plan. It's
yeah,
not going to happen.
yeah, like that's not supposed to happen. It's like, but
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was very you just feel like you get your bell rung, and you're seeing stars and you're like, what in the heck? This isn't what I thought this was going to be.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how it was. Something I actually talked about in our video this week, that I posted on our accounts is a stat from the March of or a few stats from the March of Dimes website. March of Dimes, if you didn't know, for anybody that's listening, it's an organization that's devoted to um, addressing kids with disabilities or making sure kids are born full term and healthy and all of that kind of stuff. So here's the quote from their website. I'm just going to read it directly. Miscarriage or early pregnancy loss is when a baby dies in the womb before 20 weeks of pregnancy. For women who know they're pregnant, which is about 10 to 15 in 100 or 10 to 15%, end in miscarriage. So if they know they're pregnant, 15% in miscarriage. Most miscarriages happen in the first trimester before the 12th week of pregnancy. Miscarriages in the second trimester happens in only 1 to 5 in 100. Again, 1 to 5% of pregnancies. About 1 in 100 women have repeat miscarriages. Most women who have repeat miscarriages usually have an unknown cause. That's about 75% of those ladies. And most women with repeat miscarriages with an unknown cause, about 65% of them go on to have a successful pregnancy. And that's something I shared in our video earlier this week.
Yeah. So you had Charlotte, and then you had your first miscarriage.
Yeah.
What was the process between that miscarriage and trying again?
So we waited for a little bit. A lot of it we kind of chalked up to hormonal imbalance for me.
Mm-hmm.
I've never had a common
Consistent.
consistent, thank you,
Yep.
cycle. So I don't, have my period every 28 days. It's more like, I might have it twice in a year. I might not. And that was one of the reasons I got on birth control a few years back. And so we thought that that might have something to do with it, just with inconsistent ovulation. So my OB actually put me back on birth control to kind of kickstart my body into that rhythm again. And then we figured out a date that I would come off of it and we would start trying again.
Mhm.
So we kind of went through that, and birth control really threw me for a loop after being pregnant twice. It really did a number on me mentally. So we got me off of that as soon as we possibly could. And then just started trying to calculate ovulation with just having really random cycles. And Amazon makes kits for any of the women listening where you can pee on a stick literally every single day to figure out which days you're ovulating. You can do your basal body temperature, which I did not do that. So we went that route, and it was time consuming and tiring, quite frankly.
Yeah. And it kind of goes back to the whole idea of trying. Like, it's not fun at that point.
Yeah.
Even when we were prepping for this podcast, Elizabeth was like, yeah, you feel like you're having sex for some like weird goal that like, do we make it maybe this time? Nope. Dang it. Missed it again. So it's, you feel like you're a vending machine, and like, that's a job. It takes all the fun out of it. It's not super enjoyable. So trying again became very
Trying.
there you go. I've rubbed off on her. All the dad jokes.
Oh, mom jokes, here they come.
There's a reason that's not a tagline. Mom drive minivans.
Yeah.
So how did it feel to be pregnant again, knowing that you had both your pregnancy and a miscarriage?
It was kind of weird because it was a year removed from the first miscarriage. It was kind of exciting. Like, oh my gosh, look, it finally worked.
Right. Yeah.
We did. And I was having all the normal symptoms. I was feeling pregnant. I was exhausted. And to any of the guys that I worked for that are listening to this, they're probably going to die. But the days that I was working from home, which were 2 days a week, I would literally be napping on the couch, and I would have my hand on my laptop and the volume all the way up, and I would wait to hear a ping and wait for it to like, shake a little bit so that I would know an email came through with something I needed to do. And I'd like sit up, and then I'd do it, and then I'd like fall back asleep. So, so it felt very normal. It's exciting. I mean, at 6 weeks, I made her 8-week appointment. We told people very early. So yeah, I was excited.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was definitely a sense of anxiety mixed with excitement, because the miscarriage demon, or the miscarriage beast, had already gotten us once. And so it was much more real than just like, it was much more real than the thought before of, oh, that's supposed to happen to other people. Now it was like, we are said other people, it's already happened to us. So like, what if it happens again? We're 50-50 on this thing so far.
Yeah. You have a foot in each basket per se.
Yeah. Elizabeth wanted to add something.
Yeah. And I realized that I was pregnant actually the night of my dad's wedding, because we were at the lake, and during the reception, I had had one small glass of champagne prior to the ceremony, and I was drinking wine at the reception, and I was like, ooh, I don't feel good. And I ran into the bathroom and got sick, and I was like, oh no.
Oh no.
I'm pregnant.
Was it oh no, or was it oh yes? Like,
so anytime, all 4 times that I got a positive pregnancy, I yelled out an expletive into the air. It was an oh
crap. Oh crap, right? That's what you said. That's the expletive.
Every time. Yeah. Just because it's like,
it's such a shock. Like, it's like,
100%.
It's a big deal.
And the fact that like you look at a stick to tell you, like, can we talk about how ridiculous that is? Like,
basically a magic
I gotta
wand.
pee on a stick. Like, can they not get this better? Like, come on. Anyway,
I feel like you could we have technology now. Like, you could pee on a stick plugged into your iPhone, and then your iPhone would have a screen that'd be like, "You're pregnant," and it would be like hearts and stars and exclamation points, and it would be happy, as opposed to just like. There's 2 lines. There's 1 line. There's 2. I don't even know how to read a pregnancy test. Is it two lines? You're pregnant. 1 line you're not.
2 lines you're pregnant. 1 line you're not.
There you go. Yeah. So that's what you should. They need to make an I pregnancy dick.
I'm
Smart.
sure
Might
somebody
make me
does.
think.
It's
Yeah.
probably just not
Yeah.
cheap.
So we had told a lot of our coworkers actually that we were pregnant. And I remember sitting in an area that we called the pit in the office. And I was off to the side in one of the little meeting rooms. And I was like, oh, wow, like I am cramping. And there's certain types of cramping that are associated with pregnancy that are very common. And I knew those and I could recognize those, but this one did not feel right. And I called the doctor and told them, I was like, hey, I'm cramping very significantly. This does not feel normal, but I'm not bleeding. And they're like, okay, well, that's good. If in 48 hours you're still cramping, give us a call back. And it was 2 days later, and I woke up because it was our quarterly planning meeting for our company. And I was like, something just doesn't feel right. And I got out of bed and I had been sitting in a pool of blood. So I guess I had started the miscarriage in the middle of the night. So woke Micah up and I mean, he took care of the bed. I just went to the bathroom and called the doctor. It was the after hours. So they got me in as soon as they could, which was about 10 a.m. And I think the most unfortunate and yet still the most fortunate part of that is that we then had to tell our coworkers what was happening because it's a normal day in the office. It was all hands on deck planning day, and we were required to be there. And instead, we were calling Micah's team lead. I worked for 8 or 9 guys at the time, and we had to call every one of them and tell them what was happening. And then come to find out, as we are literally leaving to go to my OBGYN's office, they call and tell us, hey, we actually don't accept your new insurance. It's going to be over $300 out of pocket. And at that time, we did not have that extra cash to spend at a doctor's appointment that was only going to confirm that I was miscarrying. Like that was the whole point, and to make sure that I did not need a DNC and have to go to the hospital. And the guys that I worked for at the time actually ended up footing the bill for us,
Oh wow.
which was amazing.
Yeah.
Very very thankful for that to them for that. But whenever you're pregnant prior to weeks and you miscarry, you typically are not eligible for a DNC because the baby is not big enough. So you have to naturally pass the baby. And I'm not going to go into a ton of details, but I did not really know what that meant because we were further along with this pregnancy than we were with the previous miscarriage. And
We were about 4.5 weeks with 4.5, 5 weeks with the first miscarriage, and this one we were almost 8.
yeah, and that's very significant from a development timeline. And after the doctor's appointment, when she confirmed that I was miscarrying, we were like, let's go see a movie. Let's just get our mind off of it, have something to distract us. And I ended up passing the baby in the movie theater bathroom. And that was the worst part of it, I think. I still hate going to that movie theater. Like, if we can go anywhere else, I never want to go there.
Mm.
Uh,
How did how did that conversation like can you kind of tell us about what I guess moreover what transpired that evening, like you know, did you go talk to Micah? What happened that evening more in detail?
Like
like
movie theater thing?
Between you guys, like what the conversations that transpired.
Well, I know even like at the movie theater, she didn't even tell me until we were in the car after the movie. Like
yeah,
that happened. The movie had just started, and she was like, "I'm gonna go to the bathroom real quick." Okay, cool. You know, just a normal like
a normal female thing to do
pee
before a
before the
movie.
movie starts. You know, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. I think it's a male thing too. I'm like, I'm gonna go pee real quick.
Or if you're Nikki,
But
she's like, I gotta go pee. 10 minutes later, I gotta pee again. 10 minutes later, I
That's
gotta pee
Micah.
again.
That's
10
me.
minutes
Like,
later, I gotta pee
at
again.
least
I'm just like,
I've had
all right,
one beer, like,
I'll just fill you in on the way home
yeah.
with what you missed.
Yeah. Yeah. What really sucked, and I feel like a lot of times it's natural that we focus on the mom when it's a miscarriage, because it definitely, I'm not taking this away from moms, it definitely affects them harder. And the thing I want to make sure people understand is like it also affects the dad. Um, to find out after we got out of the movie that that had happened, with my wife being completely alone in a stall at a
Yeah.
freaking movie theater. Um, I was so simultaneously angry, the most sad I've literally ever been in my life, feeling completely helpless. Like, I feel like it is my job to protect my wife anytime. Um, my wife is a very strong woman, I think, as exemplified even by this story. But I still feel like I'm supposed to protect her, and I was completely helpless. I couldn't help her. I wasn't there to hold her hand. I wasn't there to like rub her back or anything like that. Like just say like it's gonna be okay. I don't know how, but it's gonna be okay. And I just started punching the steering wheel. I was so angry, and I think that was just from a deep place of hurt because now, and yes, this is how my mind works. Now we were 2 and 1, and this one it just sucked a lot worse because you could feel the weight of it more since we saw Charlotte and how she was growing up. And at the time, she was 2 or about to be
She
2.
was a month away from being 2.
Yeah. And so we saw what little babies turn into. We were loving it, man. Charlotte at 2 was amazing. Charlotte at 3, whew. But so we have this little 2-year-old running around that's basically my mini me, just the girl version. And then to find out like, yeah, we're pregnant and okay, we made it farther than we did last time. So this is probably gonna happen. Like we're super excited. We're gonna tell people, and then to find out A, it doesn't happen. B, it happens in the middle of the night and not when like we can handle it. And then on top of that, the final stroke happens, when we're at a freaking movie theater, not in a place where we can like be in private to handle this. So it was very, very tough.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think we talked a whole lot about it that day. We just it is
It was very numbing.
yeah,
And it was just it's kind of like putting the nail in the coffin. Like the first time you're like, okay, like I can somewhat get past this and like be
Right.
okay. But the second time, it was just like, I mean, we started having conversations over next week of like, okay, I guess we're only meant to have one kid. Like,
yeah,
I'm not going to get back on birth control. We're not going to take any like preventative measures to like not be trying, but we're not actively trying to have a kid, and we're
Mm,
cool with just having Charlotte.
right.
Like, we got to that point very quick.
Well, so what's
yeah.
the time look like in between the second miscarriage and then getting pregnant again?
So we miscarried in early October, and on Charlotte's birthday, which is November 27th, we found out we were pregnant again, which when we backtracked would have meant that we would have conceived about 2 weeks after our
Yeah, remember
miscarriage.
the grill out with the hot dogs thing?
Hmm.
Stop.
Just kidding.
Worse.
No, yeah, that was the 2 weeks thing. That was something that we had talked about. Meaning like Elizabeth and I are all about intentional conversation. In case you couldn't tell by me being on a podcast where we have very intentional conversations, but
Mhm.
um, I told her, I said, I don't ever want to like feel like we have to bottle up our grief and set
Mhm.
it aside, but I do want to set a date in the future where we decide like, okay, now we're going to start moving forward, even if it's literally one step. And we're speaking figuratively here. Um, we wanted to just start moving forward. And that was 2 weeks out from when we had that conversation, I guess, which was like the same day or the day after.
Yeah.
So it was basically like for 2 weeks straight, whatever we need to do to grieve, however we need to cope with that. Straight up, if it's like I'm feeling chewies tonight because I'm in my feelings, then we're getting chewies,
Yeah. No,
So
and that's exactly what we did.
that's what we did. If we feel like watching a movie, we're watching a movie. If you feel like playing video games and not talking to me, that's what we're doing. So um, we gave each other a lot of grace. We gave each other a lot of comfort from a distance in many cases. And then there were times where we wanted nothing more than just to hold each other and cry. It hit us at very weird times. I remember we'd be watching a show with like,
We had to stop watching This Is Us. That's when we stopped
yeah,
watching that.
we couldn't watch This Is Us. We couldn't watch New Amsterdam, and New Amsterdam happened like way after. Like I think you were pregnant again with Lily, and like
Yeah.
all things were
Yeah,
go
everything
and all
was,
that.
yeah.
But we were watching New Amsterdam, and I think like the first episode or second episode, lady has a miscarriage, and we both just started bursting into
You're like,
tears, and we're like,
"No,
"Yep, screw the show, we're not
no."
watching it."
Hmm.
So things like that,
Yeah.
the process moving from one to another is really tough. On top of that, the during that time, even in just that what ultimately would have been, I guess, 5 weeks or 6 weeks, something like that, between miscarriage and finding out we're
Yeah.
pregnant.
Yeah, about
In
6
that
weeks.
time, I remember feeling like the best way I could describe it to people is I felt like a black hole of all emotion. I didn't feel happy about anything. I didn't feel sad about anything. You literally could have told me that Willie, my favorite dog, I'll say that on a podcast, my favorite dog, like had cancer and would die in a week. And I'd be like, man, that sucks. It's like that's actually kind of the feeling I thought of whenever we were on our batteries episode and we talked about being our spiritual battery is drained. It's more just like you get that feeling of like, oh, just
You're
another
just
thing. Oh,
numb. Like it's
100%.
nothing
Uh,
really matters. You're just like,
yeah, Charlotte could make me smile still, but like there wasn't weight behind the smile. And that was a really, really crappy place to be, being a dad. And I had to like allow myself some grace in that it's okay to hurt that way. I'm not lashing out at my 2-year old. I'm not joyful. And so I started praying and I said, God, I just need, there's a verse, I think it's like Psalm 54:12, if I remember right. Return to me the joy of my salvation. And just, I kept praying. I was like, God, I need joy back in my life. I need joy, that well of joy that no matter what the situation is, I'm still joyful. Happiness is a whole different thing, but joy is a steadfast thing. Um, and so that then led to us coming up with the
Mhm.
names Oliver Everett, which meant like peaceful warrior because I was also praying for peace and strength. So peaceful warrior, I think, is what that meant.
Mm.
And then the other name that obviously we then went with is Lily Joy, which means pure joy. So we'll get to it in a bit, but having having a baby who, if you if you met her outside of when she's squawking at you because she wants another bite of food,
Like a
is
parrot.
literally the embodiment of joy. To have prayed for that and name her that, and now she literally is that. Um, it's a crazy cool thing to go from such a low place to where daily I get to hang out with pure joy.
I think the other cool thing that we really experienced that time is just like the community aspect of it. Like we were so upfront about being pregnant again. And then when we miscarried, we were very upfront about the grief we experienced. And I mean, I think that alone was incredible. I mean, our community group rallied around us. They brought us breakfast talk next day. Our church sent us flowers.
Yeah,
Family sent us flowers. I mean, the guys that I worked for were like, You take as much time as you need." I mean, there was only one guy that I worked for that was a dad, and the others were either single or married.
and yet still
And
all of them were just take as much time as you need.
100%.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes, they were willing to do whatever we needed. Um, and that was just the coolest thing. We had friends who they had experienced a couple miscarriages that they brought us
We're even further along than us,
yeah,
like 20 weeks.
they were much further along, which was very, very traumatic.
Mhm.
But they brought us like, a cozy blanket just to snuggle with. We
Still got it.
still got it. We received so many Tiff's treats.
Bro, all the Tiff
So
treats.
many, like, you want to talk about eating your feelings. We had a plethora of
And
feelings in a
Cupcakes
I
for
box.
days.
want to talk about cutting yourself some slack. I cut myself all the slack with the Tiff
Yes.
treats, and I still couldn't finish them all. I'm pretty
Yes.
sure we threw away a dozen
We
at least,
easily.
and we had probably close to 50 cookies
Oh
Yeah.
my
given to
gosh.
us.
It was
Yeah,
insane.
yeah.
So
So that was pretty bonkers. But I remember, to kind of like transition to the final pregnancy.
Yes.
At least for now, nothing is permanent in our world. We hold things very loosely, but at least for now, it's the final pregnancy. I remember we decided to go on a lunch date, and we went to our favorite place, Pine House Pizza, of course, naturally. And I remember it kind of like struck me as just kind of weird. Um, Elizabeth said that she felt nauseous. She was like, "That's weird. I just had like 2 sips of that beer, and now I feel really sick to my stomach. I don't know if maybe I have a stomach bug or something." Now, keep in mind,
We did have a stomach bug.
Oh no.
No. Seriously, that was the same week. I literally found out I was pregnant, and the next week, remember Charlotte got a stomach bug, and then she gave it to me,
yeah.
and then I gave it to
Well,
you.
yeah, but I don't think that was like the same stomach bug, but we
It
did
was
get
the
one.
start.
And fun fact, like 4 years into marriage, 3 years into marriage, that was the first time she'd ever been around me when I threw up. I hate throwing up. It's like my least favorite thing. So,
I don't like it.
well,
If
I
it
know,
was your
but like,
favorite thing, I'd be more concerned.
Like, what do you think?
no, I mean, like, I will do whatever it takes, short of
not
putting a plunger on my face or something to plug it up. I hate throwing up. Some people are like, "Oh yeah, dude, just throw up and you'll feel better."
It's like,
But
no, I don't want to experience the feeling of vomiting. Like that's what
Yes.
I don't mind the fact that I'm
My
emptying the contents of my
inside
stomach. It's the
should say
feeling of
inside.
vomiting that I don't like.
Okay.
Yes.
let's-
Welcome to our show, Elizabeth. Yeah. So that night, I remember where we were. We were at a kitchen table. It was Charlotte's birthday. I'm sure we were eating something special with her.
Who knows?
Charlotte was sitting in Elizabeth's lap, and I was sitting very close, like same side of the table and everything with them. And Elizabeth like sat down Charlotte and then said, "I'll be right back." And when she came back, she had tears in her eyes, and I was like, "What? Like, did you throw up?
Right.
Like, I know you weren't feeling good.
You
Did you
just
throw?
went
I think I might have
pee.
asked you, like,
Yeah.
did you throw up? Are you okay?" And she burst into tears and she said, "I'm pregnant." And my first thought, which is a thought that no dad ever wants to have as a first thought when his wife says she's pregnant, "Oh no."
Yeah.
And not again.
Yeah. It was not an excited feeling. It was very scary.
I mean, it's 6 weeks after the miscarriage. Like, it's a month and a half.
Yeah. And of course, our OB was like, "Well, it's your most fertile time." And I was like, "Wish you would have told me."
Yeah.
Like, please and thank you. Because that's just, you're just so raw emotionally, or at least we were. I was not excited. I was very scared. I did not sleep well, honestly, until we had our first ultrasound, because I was like, I'm gonna wake up and I'm gonna be sitting in blood again. Like that's what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
I cried a lot until we had our first ultrasound. And our first ultrasound was the week before Christmas.
Yeah. This was kind of, I think the feeling was intentional, but the result was unintentional. My feeling was I want to distance myself emotionally from Elizabeth, or more so the baby in her belly,
Yeah.
which then the result was I also distanced myself from Elizabeth, physically, emotionally, mentally. Like
You
it,
checked out.
yeah, it wasn't directed at Elizabeth, but obviously she's the one carrying the baby, so you know it was felt by her.
Yeah. How did you?
And
How did you notice that, Elizabeth? And what?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Oh, bro, for sure.
Micah wears his emotions on his face. And it's very apparent when I'm highly emotional for multiple reasons, and early on in pregnancy, and I want to be held, I want to be hugged, and he wants to be alone and go play video games. Like he I can say this now in retrospect, like he wanted nothing to do with me just because of being pregnant.
Yeah.
Yeah. In my mind, it wasn't that I don't want anything to do with Elizabeth. It's that I don't want to emotionally accept that there's a baby in her stomach. And that's all I could think about. And I didn't realize at first. I did realize it later, and I brought it up to her and we talked about it, but I didn't realize at first that was causing me to severely back away from her. And so I acknowledged it at some point. I figured out like what I was doing and why I was doing it, and so I brought it up to her, and that's just a promise I have with her. Like I don't always know why I do things, but when I figure it out, I'll let you know. Um,
Yeah.
and so I went to her and I just said, "Hey, here's what's going on. I I want to be there for you, but I emotionally can't.
Mm-hmm.
I know I'll feel a lot better when we have that first ultrasound and see the little fluttering heartbeat, which it looks like a little flutter. It's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
It looks like a tiny little like butterfly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like in when you think about it, at that point in your lives, like you're 6 weeks out from just having your second miscarriage, and then all of a sudden Elizabeth is pregnant again. So I bet, Micah, in that moment, you're still grieving.
Oh.
I was grieving.
Both of you guys are still grieving,
bro.
Yeah.
I'm still grieving. I was
Yeah.
crying writing out these notes, man. So it's
Because I mean, even though we have 2 kids, like in my mind, we have 4 babies.
Right.
Like Lily does not replace the 2 that we lost.
Right.
And we've told Charlotte, like, you have 3 siblings.
Yeah.
Like
The 2 are
just
in
just so
heaven.
you're
Yeah.
aware.
Mhm.
Two that you will meet in heaven, and you have 1 this side of the earth.
Yeah.
But it's not like those 2 are forgotten. It's not like they're replaced. And I think people mean well when they say things like, "Oh, but look, now you
Bro.
have a baby," and it's like that does not take away the pain
Right.
of the other 2.
and
That
you
does not
still
mean.
don't have a brain.
And
Yeah.
you still
Got it.
and I really do think that they have the absolute best intentions, and they're trying to say the nicest thing, but you can still celebrate the other 2 that were here, regardless of how short of a time it was.
Right.
I had a doctor friend tell me one time who his wife had miscarriages, and he said, and this is like one of the sweet. You want to think like Mr. Rogers,
Yeah.
okay, type of man I'm talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
He goes, I had somebody tell me once after they had a miscarriage, "Oh, it's okay. You'll have another one." And he goes, and the thought just hit me. You don't say that if somebody's wife dies. Like, oh, it's okay. You'll marry
have
somebody
another
new.
one.
You know, like
Oh,
it's still
man.
to the people who get pregnant and to the mom and the dad of that baby. It is a baby,
Yeah.
and they are looking forward to it, and they get excited about it, even though they may not tell other people for however many weeks or whatever. They're still looking forward to it. They're still excited about it, and so there's that joy that wells up inside you, only to have that smashed.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And as a woman, you still go through some of the hormonal drops like you do when you give birth to a full-term baby. And I think that was the hardest thing for me, going from a miscarriage to being pregnant again, is like I went through a hormonal crash only to go through a completely new set of waves of hormones again.
Mm.
And that alone is very difficult. Like my body was like, "What on earth have you done?
Yeah.
What
What
are
have
you
we
doing?"
done? What is happening?
What did you drink, woman?
It's like the movie Inside Out at the end where they're teenagers.
Oh, and they're all
And
fighting
they're
over
all,
the
it's a
controls.
girl, it's a girl, it's a
Oh,
girl.
yeah.
Because like the girl talked to the boy.
Yeah.
And like the brain, that's what
His
I
brain's fried.
imagine the inside of.
I don't think I've ever seen that movie.
You
Ben,
would love it.
Bro,
I live under a rock, apparently. Like,
you are striking out right now.
You would really enjoy it.
I'm sorry. It's like sports ball and movies. I'm just like, you know. So what was it like? So you guys discover that you're pregnant again. The initial shock and awe of, oh my gosh, we're pregnant again. Oh my gosh, we're pregnant again. Oh my gosh, we're pregnant again. There's so many different ways to say it, and they all apply, right? How was it when Lily was born, and what's she like now?
So it was very relieving. She's just like the coolest little kid. She's like she's just the chillest. I constantly tell people she's just here for the beer. Like
We don't give our child beer, just so we're clear.
She's allergic
but
to wheat.
It's a saying, folks. Okay.
She's allergic to wheat, isn't that?
Yeah.
She's like
Yes.
gluten, right? Isn't that?
Yeah.
No?
No, yeah.
It's also in bread, Ben, in case you didn't know that.
Yeah, wheat is in bread, right? That's
Bread is in wheat. Come on.
Bread
Her
is in
birth
wheat. Bread's the state before
The
toast,
files
right?
are in the computer.
Anyway, birth was much different with Lily. With Charlotte, right after I gave birth, she was immediately taken to the NICU. So, like, we didn't get to do skin to skin. We did not get to attempt breastfeeding for the first 12 or 15 hours because she had a cannula in her nose and they wouldn't let me feed her. But with Lily, we were like adamant with the doctors. I was like, I will do skin to skin. You will not take this baby for the first hour. Like,
Yeah, we
all the things.
explicitly told the doctor, we're like, unless there's a life-threatening emergency for our baby, do not take that baby out of our room.
Yeah. And like, well, no, it was let me do skin to skin for an hour. Like, don't weigh the baby.
Well,
don't
yeah,
nothing.
but we were like, leave her here
Leave
on
her
her
here.
stomach.
Yeah.
Just don't take her.
So for those of us without kids, why?
Why don't you know what that means?
Why?
So
Why?
So it's the articles can do a much better job of explaining it than I can, but I'll do the best that I can.
Give it to me
So-
nutshelled, like I'm 5.
Yes. So when a baby is born, they're connected to the mother through the umbilical cord. So typically what the doctors will do is they take the baby and they literally just put the baby on the mom's chest and stomach area. And then they cut the umbilical cord and do all the things.
Right.
And while the baby's laying there, skin to skin is important because it helps regulate their body temperature, their heart rate, and their oxygen levels. And then it helps release oxytocin for the baby and the mom. And then it helps with breastfeeding. Like, for example, I was not able to successfully breastfeed Charlotte after like 5 days. We never got to do skin to skin, anything like that. So she was formula fed. With Lily, she's 9+ months right now, and we're still breastfeeding. And we did skin to skin and things like that. So it does have a very big mental effect. It helps fight postpartum depression. I did not experience a hormonal crash after having Lily.
Nope.
Or anything like that. So yeah. So
You're full of joy.
Yeah. So
Or I guess you were no longer
I was
full of
no
joy
longer
because
full.
you gave birth to
Lily
Thank
Joy.
But what she's like now, I mean, she squawks like a bird. She
Literally.
It's hilarious.
What is it, Bean? You want your sister? Charlotte, I think she wants you to play with her.
Oh, I'm getting hurt.
Well, hurry up. She's starting to scream for you.
I got you a bedtime story.
She'll be dead silent, just. You're like, what was that? You know?
She's like, I don't know, man. Did you see it? Where'd it go? She eats all the time. She's hilarious, but she really doesn't care to move. Like, I mean, Charlotte crawled at 8 months, and Lily's just like, yeah, like I'm here, I'm good.
Y'all can bring it to me. It's fine. Like I'll let you bring it to me.
I don't need to crawl.
For me to rewind to how it was for me when she was born, kind of like tying in how I had distanced myself from Elisabeth and ultimately Lily, because I was still grieving, to then see my daughter with my own eyes. It was very different than with Charlotte. Not better or worse, just different. Because when Charlotte came out, like Elisabeth said, I remember I had 2 thoughts with Charlotte. One, that's a weirdly cute baby. Like, I've seen newborns, they're not always cute. I'm just putting that out there. I was fully prepared to admit that my child looked like an alien.
She did.
I mean, she like coloring, but I still thought she was a really cute baby.
Yeah.
She had a cone head. That was why she looked like an alien. But I also remember she was very, very blue. And so I mean, literally five nurses just took Charlotte away. So I didn't really have a chance to like have a lot of feelings. So then I was just in protective mode for Elisabeth. And with Lily, dude, I saw her and I was like, she's real. She's here. We have prayed for her. She's my little baby. She was much smaller than Charlotte.
Just 2 pounds smaller, which is very significant, let me tell you.
Yeah. Actually, because of her size, in case anybody ever wants to know, that's why we call her the Bean.
The Bean.
The Bean. We'll have to get a video of Charlotte singing the Bean theme song.
Yes.
Because I had
best.
definitely made up a little song for her. The Bean. The Bean. Oh, I love the Bean. I love when she smiles, or when she laughs and she smiles at me. Can you smile, Lily? The bean, the bean. Oh, I love the bean. I love when she dances and she giggles and she sings. Can you sing? Say, ah! There you go. Ah! And dance. Dance. But once Elizabeth had some skin to skin time, and we knew everything was stable and good, I walked out to go find my dad, who was waiting to like hear, is she here or whatever,
Well, he
So,
was in the room when she was born. You
well,
just
yeah,
went out
but
there.
then they walked away. So I went to find my dad, and my dad is as tall as me. However, I have him on size considerably, and I almost broke him in half with how hard I hugged him, just because I think that was the full circle for me, going from grieving at such a loss to then here she was, my baby, and I sobbed into my dad's shoulder so hard.
Mhm.
Um, and all the memories came back of all the pain that we had experienced and stuff. So that's how it was. And now, like Elizabeth said, she squawks. She also has a really fuzzy head. Like she's got hair.
She's got
Charlotte didn't.
my baby fuzzy head.
Yeah. And so she already looks like a baby bird, and then she squawks. And I'm like, all right, Bean, just full scope here, full circle. You're just really in character. I think what's funny is she responds better to Bean, look over here, than she does her own name.
Bane.
Yeah.
Like if you say Lily, she's like la 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 la.
Just
Like,
looking away,
who's
doesn't pay
that?
attention. And you're like, Bean, huh?
Bane.
She'll look at you.
Unfortunately, that may stick.
Oh,
It will,
100%.
100%. She has a song,
So looking back on everything, you've two kids, you have two miscarriages. It's been just a whirlwind. How does it all feel? Like looking back on it, and now that you're kind of out of the woodworks, if you would.
I mean, it's still kind of surreal to like look back and be like, wow, I can't believe we went through that.
Yeah.
Like just because you don't think about it ahead of time that it's even.
Well, like kind of like how Micah said, is it happens to everybody else, and you never expect it'll
exactly.
happen to you.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's still hard to talk about, but I think it's totally necessary because we did not even know how many of our friends had miscarriages
Wow.
until we went through one. And that was so comforting. And I was like, wow, I wish I would have known that before. I would have known exactly who I should have reached out to when we miscarried. And that's one of the reasons why we're so upfront about it.
Yeah.
Just because we've even seen it. We've seen our friends reach out and be like, hey, I think I just went through a miscarriage. Like, they were too early to really confirm it or things like that. But I don't know. It feels like we're like closing a chapter almost of like making children somehow.
Yeah.
like just because I think that's one of the hangups with like, okay, would we ever want a third kid? Is it's like, man, would we really want to risk that emotional roller coaster again?
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, for me, it was even tough typing the notes. I already said I was crying. Specifically when I typed like, what was it like, when Lily was born, and seeing her for the first time, I just started crying because I felt that wave of emotions again. It's crazy. The pain is still there. Like if you had a really thick scar somewhere that has nerve damage and stuff, sometimes you get like it's actually really painful even to touch a scar. And that's the best example I can give is if we start talking about it, um, it can be really painful. But at the same time, I would also cry because it's so joyful knowing that we have the little bean that we have. I have a lot more empathy for women who have miscarriages because I've had a front row seat to what that looks like. And I also get to encourage dads who are having the front row seat to their own chapter. And like I mentioned, even on our last podcast, kind of this episode, I had a friend call me just a few weeks ago and say they had a miscarriage. Uh, and he said, I know y'all had one. I don't even know how I should feel. I know that my wife feels one way and I feel this way. I feel like I'm not doing this right. And I was able to just tell him, dude, you're doing it the way that you're doing it. There's no comparison. There's no like set list of symptoms for you to check, like, oh, I'm not crying enough. Dang, I'm not a good husband. Nothing like that. You're allowed to feel your feelings and it's going to be different for your wife.
Yeah.
That's it. What was really cool for our experience, and I encourage other people to do this, but you don't choose your own thing. We had decided to tell people both times to a degree. The first one we didn't tell as many people, and then the second one we told a lot more people, like a week before we had the miscarriage.
Yeah.
And I remember we had a conversation about that too. And I just told Elizabeth, regardless of what happens, I want our community to be with us in this. So successful pregnancy, I want them to be there celebrating with us. Another miscarriage, and I said this before we actually had a second miscarriage. I said, if we have another miscarriage, I want them to be in it with us. And in hindsight, I am very, very thankful,
Yep.
very thankful that we decided to tell people when we even still had a miscarriage, because that would have been so much more difficult to walk through that alone. I think there's something to be said about allowing people to be on that emotional roller coaster with you. Even if like the guys that she worked for, they hadn't had kids all except for Justin. And so they don't even know what it's like to be a parent. But yet, because they saw the excitement and they felt the excitement of like, holy smokes, you're pregnant. This is going to be really cool. Like you're going to be pregnant and working. And like, we're going to ask you all the fun questions, which still happened. Still happened. And they like asked her all the fun questions, but they were excited with us. So then they also felt that emotional dip whenever we had the miscarriage. So I'm just very thankful that we talked about it. As some encouragement, just to put some perspective on this whole conversation, I wanted to share a quote from an article I read earlier in The Guardian. Read it this week, and here it is. There is a social convention that you shouldn't reveal a pregnancy until after 12 weeks, once the highest risk of miscarriage has passed. It goes unchallenged thanks to age-old squeamishness. That's a word. And shame,
Squeamishness.
and shame around women's bodies and our collective ineloquence on matters of grief. The bloody, untimely end of a pregnancy sits at the center of a perfect Venn diagram of things that make us uncomfortable: sex, death, and periods. So, why are we talking about this on a podcast? What should we do? Elizabeth, you're our special guest, so why don't you tell us first?
Oh, great.
Give us your thoughts.
Yes.
Thoughts for your thoughts.
I think the first thing is just like the biggest realization and the hardest feeling that I had with the miscarriages was feeling like I could not be a woman because my body was not literally producing the way that it was supposed to and functioning. And I had people tell me, "Oh, that's why you wait until 12 weeks to tell people you're pregnant." And it just it furthers the shame that you're already feeling. And that's just I don't want that welcomed in my life. I don't want that welcomed in both of our daughters' lives. And like I'm still a mom to those two kids. I'm not going to meet them until I'm in heaven, but I'm still a mom to those kids. And that's important to acknowledge. And I can't imagine the moms who have miscarriages first prior to having kids. I've never been through that, but they're still moms too, and they're still women too, and their body is not failing them. So that's my biggest
really
encouragement.
Ticks me off when people are like, well, see, that's why you should have waited.
Yeah.
Why you should have waited because you planned on this. Like,
yeah, right. Yeah. And to me, what they're communicating is like,
I'm uncomfortable.
you should have kept that to yourself, you know? that's a really dark thing going on in your life, and like you don't know what's going to happen, so you may as well just not let anybody know. Right. So what you're telling me is that excitement or grief, I should just handle this on my own.
Yeah.
That's what I feel like people get told, and what that quote was about is like, it's this perfect intersection of all these things that make us uncomfortable. We don't want to talk about sex. We don't want to talk about death. We don't want to talk about periods. I mean, it's uncomfortable, but what's the side effect? What's the unintended consequence because we don't want to talk about these things? You have women that go through such a terrible experience and they're told, yeah, but like you got to deal with that.
Yeah.
And I feel like for the most part, only people who have been through it are the ones who will walk through that like in secret if you haven't told people. But in our case, we had so many people because we had just, hey, we're pregnant, exciting, that sort of thing. And we had so many people that surrounded us who haven't even been pregnant. They haven't had miscarriages. Some people that had been pregnant had kids and didn't have a miscarriage. And they're like, I can't imagine what you're going through. Other people who are just like, man, what does that feel like? And they just let us talk.
Yeah.
Or they brought us a blanket and said, you don't have to talk. We get it. There you go.
Yeah.
So I just surround yourself with community. That's kind of the bottom line. We chose to tell people that we were pregnant earlier than some would have because we wanted people to be with us no matter what. Come hell or high water, we surround ourselves with community because we want people who love and care about us to be there with us no matter what's going on. So that's why like friend time is very important to me. That's why we're involved in our church and our community group. We want to be surrounded by people who want to be in community with us ultimately.
I mean, one of the ladies in our community group, hey Leanne, she her and her husband were there with us through the second miscarriage,
Mhm.
and then she was at the hospital when Lily was born. So
Yep.
it's just very cool.
So I know you've kind of touched on what you would say to women out there, but kind of give us your final thoughts.
Like you're not alone. It's not shameful. You're not less of a woman. You're still worthy. You're still seen. It's okay to not want to be touched by your husband for a while. It's okay to need to just be you for a bit.
It's okay to eat the Tiff's treats.
It's okay to eat the cookies and just to wallow for a little bit. But at some point, you do have to choose to come out. And whether you choose to try again or not, like that's totally up to you and your partner. But just know that it's not going to last forever. That wallowing feeling, you'll still feel like you're losing out on an opportunity to raise the kids that you didn't get to birth, but it does get easier. And there's a quote from Brene Brown that I love actually here tonight, but it says, one day you will tell your story of how you overcame what you went through, and it will be someone else's survival guide. So
dang,
yeah, just thought that was very inspiring.
that should be like the quote for our podcast.
Someone
else's survival guide.
Oh,
that's pretty good.
Yeah,
it is.
yeah.
like
Thanks,
that.
Brene. But yeah,
Elizabeth, while you were talking about that, though, the only thing that I could think of was, "This too shall pass."
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of, we haven't been in that same situation, but I feel like it's with anything that's overwhelmingly unfair and tough and miserable, is this too shall pass. That's gotten me through a lot of tough times.
Something I've been on the podcast is like, so often, I think this was our overcoming obstacles one, but so often we approach obstacles and we're like, oh, eventually, like you said, this too shall pass. And then we pass it and we just like wait for the next obstacle or something,
Yeah.
And it's, I hate that. And I didn't realize this until literally December is when I really had the definitive thought of like, we should really celebrate more when we get done with a freaking obstacle.
Yeah.
Because I have read too many studies to back up celebrating small wins, and too many little books and whatever. So I just, to me, what that looks like practically in my life right now is I try to enjoy the most I can the moments that I have with Lily and with Charlotte, even when today she kicked me because she was angry and she screamed no at me when I just told her I wasn't going to play a show on my phone. Like,
Life-changing
what?
things.
You know, duct tape solves both those issues. You can duct tape her feet together so she can't kick you, and then you can just put duct tape over her mouth.
No,
can't yell
she
at you.
can. She can kick me with them duct taped together. She'll kick me like a cannon. She's got strong little thunder thighs. But
Just hop
anyway,
around like a pogo stick, just chasing after you.
right.
She would. It's Charlotte. Are you kidding?
She doesn't stop, man.
Yeah.
Lily would be like, "Nah, I'm tired."
Yeah.
Lily would be like, I don't want to move. I'm good where I'm at.
She's like, "Have you seen my toes?
Yeah.
They're really basic."
And then she'll go,
Yeah. Little squawk. Man. Well, on our next episode, we will be talking about a fun topic. I know we've had a lot of serious topics and we try to make it a casual conversation. I don't want to say a light conversation because we don't want to downplay any of the topics that we discuss, but we try to make it casual. Well, Ben and I want to take a little pause from the super serious, and we're going to talk about video games and technology.
My least favorite topic and the boys' favorite.
What, technology? How dare you?
video games and technology.
Yeah, but we, what's funny is I actually took a class called The History of Technology because I was studying to be a history teacher. So I'm going to bring up some of that fun knowledge. I actually wrote a report on the history of video games. So strap in.
You know, it's funny. I
That's
wasn't.
content for the podcast.
Yeah.
I think my passion for video games stems from the fact that my mom was always like, "No, go outside." So it was always like something that I wasn't allowed to do, and so like I go over to friends' houses who've had video game systems and play video games, and I didn't get my first system till I was like in 8th grade.
That was close for me. I think I was 5th or 6th grade.
Yeah.
I was almost there. I would always go over to Steven's house and play PlayStation and Super Nintendo.
I still have my original PlayStation.
Nice. So this time we're gonna chat about something we love and something that quite honestly affects all of us. We have robots in our bedrooms that record our voices and do little commands that we, yeah, she's over there, but do things that we ask them to do, and automatic lights, and I don't know, a microphone, a computer, an iPhone, Apple Watches. Look like a Power Ranger right then, just Apple Watch. Yeah, so anyway, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, you should check out these videos when we post them to YouTube. But it should be a good time, and I hope that you will join us.
Yeah. Be sure to check out our Audible. Don't forget about that.
Don't forget audibletrial.com/MBP. And at this point, if you don't know what MBP stands for, I don't know how to help you. But that'd be the best way to support us and support yourself by setting up a free trial so that we can hopefully get some better equipment and lighting. So we're not doing these videos from my phone. But yes, yeah, Audible, it's a good place. Also, be sure to connect with us on all the social medias, the Facebook, the Instagrams, and the Twitters. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can come find me on there. But if you love this podcast and you think that this has been impactful for you, mostly because Elisabeth was on this episode, then by all means, don't let us stop you from telling all of your friends, family, neighbors, and strangers. We would love for them to like this episode as well, and the whole podcast. So make sure you subscribe. Tell them to subscribe. And we don't care what your hair looks like in the morning. You're killing it. We will talk to y'all later. Bye.
Bye.
Bean, you see those mushrooms?